My name's Curtis Cavers. I'm the co-chair of this session with John Hurd, and I would like to introduce our next speaker. Ashley Ammeter is the whole farm specialist with Manitoba Crop Alliance. Ashley grew up on a grains and oilseed farm in Manitoba and received her Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Master of Science in Plant Science, both from the University of Manitoba. Her role as a whole farm specialist, Ashley is responsible for providing knowledge and understanding of a whole farm approach to crop production and extension of results that are cross-commodity in nature. So she is speaking today on biological products in Manitoba cropping systems, insights from on-farm research. Welcome, Ashley.
Okay. Thank you, Curtis. So for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with Manitoba Crop Alliance and what we do, Manitoba Crop Alliance is one of the commodity groups in Manitoba. So we collect a checkoff from farmers, and then our role is to fund research as well as represent farmer members. Today I'm presenting results from some of our on-farm research trials that we run, as well as results from on-farm research trials from some of our partner organizations, so Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers and Manitoba Canola Growers. Yeah, wow, right? But before we get into that, I want to talk about what are we talking about when we're talking biostimulants, biological products. Yeah, so this totally clears it up. Everyone has an understanding now. So obviously this is a very complicated space. As a couple of people have already mentioned today, this is an area that is hugely expanding. And when we're talking about these products, it's a huge range of roles and kinds of products. Some of them are living, some of them are non-living. And again, this is just companies involved. These are not individual products. These are just companies producing products. So it's a very large, very complicated space. The other challenge in this area is defining what we're talking about. Often farmers and agronomists, we're talking about biologicals. Often researchers are using the term biostimulants. These are a couple of legal definitions. So in the EU, they have a legal definition for biostimulants. In the US, they're also working on a legal definition for biostimulants. Essentially, some common features that we're seeing are these are substances or products that are acting independent of the nutrient content of that product. And they have the aim of increasing nutrient efficiency, availability, uptake, increasing stress, abiotic stress tolerance, improving yield or quality. And so when we're looking at what exactly are these products, as I mentioned, they can be living, so they can be bacteria, fungi, something is alive in that product, or they can be non-living, so an extract or some other substance. So when we're talking living, there's a few different categories. We have nitrogen-fixing bacteria. This should be familiar for everybody. These are bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available nitrogen. We have phosphorus-solubilizing microbes. So again, a lot of us are probably familiar with this class. They're increasing the availability of soil phosphorus. Plant growth promoting rhizobacteria do a variety of roles, but they can enhance root growth and nutrient uptake. Mycorrhizal fungi, they associate with the crop root, essentially acting as an extension of the crop root. And then residue decomposers have a variety of roles, but often are used to enhance crop residue breakdown. This is a non-complete list, I should say. When we're talking about non-living products, again, not a complete list, but a few of the more common products or ingredients that we see are humic and fulvic acids. So these are a carbon source, typically, that is used to either stimulate the microbes in the soil or mimic a plant hormone to increase root growth, increasing the uptake of nutrients, or because they are negatively charged, they can chelate cations, which can increase nutrient availability. Seaweed extracts are exactly what they sound like. They have a variety of components in them. Generally, we're looking at stress tolerance, increasing nutrient uptake, improving plant growth in a variety of different ways. Enzymes, this is probably also familiar to some people. These are used to catalyze reactions and increase the release of nutrients from organic matter that is already in the soil. So phosphatases that release phosphorus from organic matter, cellulases to improve residue breakdown, and then amino acids and protein hydrolysates, again, increasing nutrient uptake, mitigating stress, increasing microbe activity. In Canada, we don't necessarily have a firm definition of what constitutes a biostimulant or biological product. In Canada, most of the time, they're regulated under the Fertilizers Act and Regulations, which is administered by the CFIA. And so these are included under the definition of a supplement. Essentially, these are products that are not a fertilizer, but are used to improve the physical condition of the soil or aid in plant growth. Now, the reason that is relevant for our discussion today is because in order to have a product registered under the Fertilizers Act by CFIA, you need to prove that it's safe for people, for animals, for plants, for the environment. You need to have a proper label on your product. What you don't need to do is prove efficacy. And so that's not to say that all of these products are snake oil, that none of these products work, but it does mean that we're in a bit of a buyer beware situation. And so that's when on-farm research comes in. Each of the commodity groups in Manitoba, so Manitoba Crop Alliance, Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers, and Manitoba Canola Growers, all run on-farm research programs. These are programs in which we test products and practices on our farmers' fields with their equipment, and these are really led by the farmers. In all cases, these are randomized trials, typically a minimum of 4 replications. Each of the plots goes the entire length of the field, a minimum of 1,000 feet, and the width of the plot is at least as wide as a single combine pass. And we try and keep these protocols simple and practical, answering questions that farmers themselves had. Now, the goal here is not to do this instead of small plot research. It's used as a complement to small plot research. Small plot research is great because it allows us to test lots of different treatments on typically uniform, less variable sites. We can really easily detect, or we can more easily detect small, significant differences that are real and repeatable. But on-farm research becomes important when we're looking at implementing those products and practices. We're involving the farmers in the process so that they can learn how this research is done and how it applies on their farm. Before I get into the actual data, I want to make sure I give a shout out to Tone Ag Consulting and New Era. These are folks who help all of our organizations with the on-farm research, particularly the research we're talking about today. Jordan and Liz are here. If you have questions about specific trials, they can probably help you. But these are folks who are really important in making sure that this actually happens. So, the moment we've all been waiting for, the actual data. First, a nitrogen-fixing bacteria product. This was Invita in corn. These trials were done in 2023, 2024. With this product, often the recommendation is either using Invita on top of your normal nitrogen rate or decreasing your nitrogen rate and using Invita to maintain your current yields. In these trials, it was applied as a foliar application, I believe at around V5, but I'd have to double check that for you. Unfortunately, in 2024, we saw no statistical yield differences. In 2023, we did see one statistically significant yield decrease, but that was a case in which the full nitrogen rate yielded better than any of the others. And so in these cases, when we're looking at a product cost of, at this time, it was around $14 an acre, the math just wasn't penciling out. Wheat, again, Invita, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, same idea, comparing a full rate of nitrogen versus a reduced rate of nitrogen with the use of a nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Only 2 sites in this case, but again, no significant yield differences between our treatments. Manitoba Crop Alliance has also tested a variety of other products. So in this case, products that were lignin and kelp extracts, a humic acid substance, a biostimulant that has vitamins and enzymes, and then another lignin-based product. These were seed treatments, or in the case of the first on the far left there, a seed treatment and a foliar application. Again, no significant yield differences. Moving on to canola, the folks at Manitoba Canola Growers have done 3 trials, I should say. In this case, it was with an experimental product. So this was an antifungal bioinoculant. Again, unfortunately, no significant yield differences. Manitoba pulse and soybean growers have a really large, really well-established on-farm research network. They have done a total of 44 trials since 2019, looking specifically at various biological products in soybean primarily, but as well as in peas and dry beans. Again, a variety of different products, so some nitrogen-fixing biological products, some humic acids, some seaweed extracts, kind of runs the gamut. Again, unfortunately, in none of these cases has yield increased with the use of a biological product. And so in the case of these products, the price ranged from anywhere from $5 to $28 an acre, and so that means a loss in profit. That's all pretty bleak. So what about small plot research? So I pulled a couple of examples from nearby, including research done by the Indian Head Ag Research Foundation, Chris, who just spoke before the break. In this case, they were looking at nitrogen-fixing biological products in both wheat and canola across a variety of sites, a variety of soil types. Unfortunately, they were seeing similar trends in which no significant yield differences. And then Dave Franzen, out of NDSU, did quite a large study, 61 site years of trials looking at both nitrogen rate with and without a variety of different nitrogen-fixing biological products in a variety of crops, so wheat, corn, sugar beet, and canola, across 10 US states. The data I have up in front of you here is just for corn, because wheat, sugar beet, and canola didn't show any statistical yield differences, but they did see a positive yield response in 2 cases. So one is in Minnesota, Pruven, improved yield by 9 bushels an acre, equivalent to what you would have seen from about a 20 pounds per acre nitrogen increase. And then the other was in Missouri, an Invita in-furrow application, improved yield by about 6 bushels an acre, equivalent to about an additional 12 pounds of nitrogen. So what we're seeing here in Manitoba and locally, not a lot of significant yield responses, but you may be familiar with research at other land-grant universities, other parts of the world, or maybe even closer here at home that has shown yield responses. And so one of the questions we can ask is, why are results so inconsistent? And there's a variety of reasons. First is that when we're looking at microbial products, not only are we applying this microbial product and hoping that it establishes and does its job, but it's also having to compete with a really large resident microbial community. And that resident microbial community is established, it is well adapted to the soils that they're living in, and so we're having to compete with that. Of course, again, in the case of living products especially, not only do you have to have a product that you can apply that then has action on the plant, but you have to keep it alive until it gets there. So the formulation can be really challenging, storage can be really challenging with these products. And then of course, earlier today, a lot of our speakers were talking about that G by E by M interaction, so differences in soil types, differences in environment and climate conditions, differences in management practices. These can all play a role in the efficacy of these products. And then plant characteristics. So not only is it their potential that these products work better with some species versus others, but what about certain varieties? There's been research that shows that certain genotypic effects in the interactions between microbes and plants. So how does that play in? And then the stage of plants, how does that play a role? And so because a lot of these products are newer, there are so many on the market, and there are so many, or there's a lack of third-party data, it means that we don't really have answers to a lot of these questions, unfortunately. And so an obvious question when we're thinking, how do I best make use of these products on my farm, or how do I best advise my clients to make use of these products, is when do we see the greatest yield response? So I pulled two different meta-analyses here. These are global meta-analyses. So they're taking a bunch of other studies that were done and then combining that data and analyzing them all together. So the first was a meta-analysis of microbial products, so living products. These researchers took 171 studies, looked at a variety of different microbial products, looked at a variety of different crops, so cereals, root crops, legumes, vegetables, other crops. And what they saw was that the yield response tended to be greatest in drier climates. It tended to be the smallest in continental climates, like Manitoba. Nitrogen-fixing bacterial products tended to have the best response when soil test phosphorus was high. Mycorrhizal fungi products tended to have the best response when soil phosphorus was low, soil organic matter was low, and the soil had a approximately neutral pH. On the other hand, the other meta-analysis I pulled here was looking at non-microbial products. So again, this was looking at 180 different studies. Most of the sites were actually in Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean, but it did include some in North America. Again, a variety of crops, so cereals, fruits, legumes, root crops, and others. Similar to the first study, yield response tended to be greatest when there was limited water availability, so an arid climate. And they tended to have the highest response on poor soils. So low soil organic matter, mildly alkaline or acidic, saline soils, nutrient insufficient soils, and sandy soils. This tends to be, in these meta-analyses, where the biggest response is seen. So if, as an agronomist, you're thinking, when should we best be recommending these products, or as a farmer, you're wanting to consider using one of these products, a few things I would recommend you consider. First, start with solid agronomy. Like a lot of the speakers this morning talked about, having good crop management, getting your fertility down, managing your pests, those make the biggest difference in closing that yield gap. If you do choose to consider these products, think about what specific problem are you trying to solve? What is your issue that you're trying to improve? And then based on that, is it a long-term game? Is it a short-term game? Again, all of the data I was talking about here is looking at yield data. Maybe for you, you're concerned about something else. Maybe you want to, improve your quality, your grain quality. Maybe one of these products can help you do that. Consider what are the active ingredients in the product I'm looking at. Does that active ingredient have a realistic way of doing what I want it to do? And then, of course, there's limited third-party data, but if at all possible, look at third-party data, preferably replicated. Look at the stats of that data, and then evaluate from there. But again, because we're in a situation in Canada and in many areas around the world where it's a buyer beware market, it means that we have to do our due diligence when we're looking at these products. So as I'm wrapping up here, I just want to give another plug for the on-farm research networks of our commodity groups. Kendall, Madison, and Chris are the ones who lead for each of the various commodity groups. They helped me pull the data that I presented today. If you have any questions about these trials or any other trials that we've run, because we've done a whole bunch of trials, or if you're interested in participating in our on-farm networks, or if you have farmer clients who are members of our organizations who want to participate, I would highly recommend you contact these people. And with that, I don't know what our time is like, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, you've got us on time, or ahead of time, if nothing else here. So the question, yeah, I'll run the mic up to you, James, there. Because I'm already up. John was going to do it, but, I'm here.
Thanks. From the work that you've done reviewing literature around that, is there, thinking of third-party testing, what stands out as a good trial design for something with so much variability, as you've mentioned, where there's so many factors that could influence the outcome, obviously replicated things, but did anything stand out from the literature?
You've already kind of led into it. Replicates, lots of replicates, if possible, multi-site, multi-year, and a variation in sites. So not just really great land, like a lot of research is done on, but some really good land, poor land, lots of variation. I think with these products, because we're looking at small incremental increases, if any, it means you have to have a lot of data to get good information about when they work.
You got any online?
There's just one here. There's a couple, actually. They're popping in now. Are global meta-analyses relevant to Western Canada, given the difference between glaciated and non-glaciated soils?
Great question. Not necessarily. Unfortunately, in this area of the world, in Western Canada, we don't have a lot of replicated third-party data on these products, or at least not where they're showing significant differences. So the message there is, yes, take them with a grain of salt. They can show trends. They can't show us what's going to work here for us. But the good news is we do have some ongoing research. So the poster that was mentioned earlier, I know of a few other studies that are in the works that are being funded by commodity groups as well as others. So the data is coming, but we're not there yet with local data.
You got a question, John? No.
Are our prairie soils just too damn healthy?
Okay, that was it. That could be part of it. Those global meta-analyses are showing that it tends to be the less healthy soils where you're seeing significant or larger yield responses. And generally speaking, here in the prairie, we have younger, healthier, high organic matter soils. So we have that benefit that we're working on. So that's maybe part of what we're seeing, for sure.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So are you stopping short of saying they don't work?
No, because what I would say is we haven't seen them working. That doesn't mean that they don't work. I want to be fair. Because
Are you ever going to run for public office? You might be able to.
One of the issues is, and I've done it here as well, is paint all of these products with a broad brush. So are there individual products that do give likely smaller yield increases? Yeah, probably. There are logical mechanisms of action that they could benefit. Particularly, we're seeing them in greenhouse studies. So the mechanism is there. Does that mean that they will work for us? Not necessarily. We haven't seen it so far.
There's another question online, Ashley, and I think it carries through with what you're talking about right now. So the comment is, when I've spoken to reps from companies supplying these products, they'll say it doesn't translate well into broad trials and that they need to work with the farm to see what their specific soil needs are. So how do farmers navigate this?
That's a hard question. The first thing I would say is consider what exactly the problem is you're trying to solve. If your problem is, I want my crop to grow better, you're probably not going to see the benefit that you want. and generally, unless you're doing everything else right, unless you have your fertility really well dialed in, you're using good genetics, you have your pest management dialed in, there are probably other practices that will give you better bang for your buck. If you do want to try these, maybe do a trial, take everything with a grain of salt. But I do think that likely where this is going is these will have specific uses in specific cases. It seems unlikely that it will be a one product everywhere works.
We got time? I'm probably one of the
Okay, it's not a question, it's a statement. There are so many of these products. The bare minimum the companies can ask of farmers is to try it for free. Farmers should not be paying for products that they have absolutely zero evidence works.
I agree.
So the idea that a farmer needs to invest years of dollars into a product before they can self-produce results on their own dime is absurd. So the companies that are making these products either have your data yourself, or you give the product for free and hope the farmer is generous to give you the data back, or you produce your own data. Like, pay the farmers to make the data for you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a situation where it is buyer beware, and right now it is up to the responsibility of the farmers to trial the products themselves, which is why we've done the trials. But no, I fully agree.
Okay, I think I'm going to cut it off there. I appreciate you handling that. Thanks, Ashley.